we're so excited that you're here today. My name is Rianne. I am 21 Acres Administrative Assistant, and we're here with some of my favorite people on the planet. We have our farm lead, Anthony Reyes, who's going to be, excuse me, who's going to be our tour guide today. And then we also have Jess Chandler, our wetland restoration specialist, who is filming today. And we're so glad you're here. We're going to get into some great processes on the farm. Welcoming spring again is just such a blessing. We made it through the winter, folks. We did it. So first, I'd like to let everyone know that we very much encourage discussion and participation on these live tours, and we love hearing from you, engaging in community dialogue. Your participation makes the tours really fun for us and pertinent for you too, so you feel free to ask questions and feel supported to like share sentiments as they come up through the tour. And Anthony will be guiding us through the farm and kind of pausing here and there for Q&A. You can use the chat feature, ask questions to Anthony or chat amongst each other. And one of my roles is to facilitate these questions. So I'll be able to share questions that come up with Anthony. And yeah, and you can also, at certain times, you can feel free to unmute yourself when there's a good pausing time, or just go through the chat, because we do record these live events. So some people might not be comfortable having their microphone off, but do know that it's only my face and Anthony's face that will be on the screen, along with all the beautiful plant friends and animal friends you will see. So there's a little bit of insight to how the tour goes with through Zoom. We miss everyone. I can't wait to have everyone come back on campus. But I'm glad you could join us here today. So here's a little bit more about 21 Acres for those who may not know. 21 Acres is a living laboratory here in Woodinville, Washington, which serves to educate our communities around climate change and how to participate in climate action by promoting and building resilient food systems rooted in agroecology, regenerative farming, sustainable land stewardship, and adopting sustainable living and building practices. And I'd like to give a land acknowledgement as well. So 21 Acres is located in Woodinville, Washington, on the ancestral lands of indigenous nations, including the Stillaguamish tribe, along with the Duwamish and Coast Salish peoples. We acknowledge these nations as the original stewards of this land, and we honor both the land itself and these nations, past and present. And we really are grateful to help steward this land for future generations. So we're grateful that you're taking time today to learn how we're stewarding this land and how we can be better land stewards in general for those who have the luxury of property. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this off to Anthony and Jess to introduce themselves a little bit more, and I'm going to be hiding in the chat. So talk to you there. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Rianne. I'm going to take my mask off here. Jess and I are going to be 6 feet apart this entire time, but just so y'all can hear me a little bit better. Yeah, welcome to the tour. I'm really excited to be able to show you all around and like share a lot of what we're doing on the property, specifically in the farm, and especially like this time of year is one of my favorites because as we go around, I want to invite everybody to just sort of sit and notice everything that's happening. And because right now there's seemingly not a lot, but there's also tons and tons and tons as the sun's coming out more and as the seasons are changing. And also just I want to invite y'all to come to some of the later farm tours as well and really track the progress that you're seeing out here. Because from this point on, it's like the calm before the storm of everything happening on the farm. And I'll be talking through a lot of that stuff today. I also want to take a quick second to just sort of talk about one of our farming philosophies here, and I'll be sort of interweaving it with our dialogue throughout. And so that's agroecology, and Rianne mentioned it a second ago. And so it's very simply, it's an ecological approach to agriculture. And once we start teasing out what it means to have an ecological approach to agriculture, you have to be starting to think about all the different ways in which we think of ecology. So that's like environmental, social, political, economic, and so then that topic and that idea becomes so much more complex, and it's really a practice that's rooted in personal experience, narratives, and it changes a lot of the ways that we it changed a lot of the ways and interrogates our ways of knowing and our ways of learning. And so that's one of the things that we're really excited about. And I'll be sort of teasing that apart as we go along today. I also wanted to take a moment to answer some of the questions that we had on the registration form. And because yeah, I was really excited to see the questions and really excited to see that there's the investment in what we're doing here. And so the question was how does and Rianne, please correct me if I'm paraphrasing it incorrectly. But the question was how is 21 Acres providing opportunities or providing resources for women of color in our programming? And that's a huge topic, and it's one that it's one that we're constantly interrogating. How are we showing up, and how are we interacting? And one of the things that there's a lot of ways that I'm going to answer this, but one of the things is that right now we're actually in the process of reimagining what our educational programming is going to be on the farm, and so a part of that is COVID sort of provided an opportunity for us to be able to step back and really ask and envision like what it is we're really wanting to see and wanting to do, of course, with this end goal of climate action and climate justice, and that is intrinsically tied to lived experiences and these sort of topics of social justice and equity. So currently right now, like what we're doing is a lot of just like planning and wanting to be as intentional as possible. And I think right now, what's really important for me and for us is to make sure that if we're building partnerships with people, that it's going to be building them in a genuine, honest, trusting and respectful way. And so a lot of what that looks like is doing a lot of internal work initially and really interrogating how we're going to be showing up and like what it means to be an ally in a lot of these larger movements and larger systems at hand. And it's also something that like it is a conversation, and it is a continued dialogue, and it's a continued practice, and it's one that we welcome, and it's one that we really want to be fostering, and also acknowledging that like one of my favorite sayings is nobody has all the answers, but together we know a lot. And so it's really looking at that, how being very tactful over how we're going to be taking the next steps and making sure that as we're working and expanding the communities that we're working alongside, that our voice is one that's in support and in allyship. And so it's really interrogating where we're coming from and doing work from our internal standpoint before really building lots of partnerships moving forward. And so and I also want to say that I get a lot of energy out of a lot of these dialogues and a lot of these conversations, and really want to invite them and like invite feedback and invite all of these other conversations, and and wanted to really thank you for that question coming through. I got pretty excited when I read it.
Yeah, all the questions that have come in for our registration were really exciting to see. People were really curious to like learn about all the deeper processes of regenerative agriculture and how this helps with climate change. And it's all kind of woven together where environmental justice and social justice are one and the same, and we get to it's great that we're at this place now in our organization that we're looking to expand meaningfully these kinds of just initiatives and partnerships and programs that will actually make helpful change to people who've been so marginalized throughout Washington's history and the world too. So
Yeah.
we were very pumped to receive these questions. Exactly. I just wanted to echo that.
Mhm. And I'll continue talking about some of the ways that we're sort of centering social justice and equity and all of these conversations within our regular practices, because that's something that's so central to an agroecological farming system and an agroecological food system.
Yes.
Yeah, let's take a walk. Let's see some of the farm. The daffodils are blooming right now, so that's probably one of the most exciting things that's going on out here, that you can visually see. I think the most exciting thing that's going on right now is everything that's happening in the soil. We're at this really interesting point where the water is starting to recede from the water table, and so that the soil is able to be worked a little bit more, and so a lot of these biotic processes are getting started, and that's really what we're all about, is providing the conditions within our soil to let the biotic, the chemical aspects to really thrive, because they're the real heavy lifters behind everything that we're doing. The only thing that my responsibility out here is to facilitate these relationships and facilitate a space in the soil where these microbes and microorganisms and vertebrates, invertebrates can thrive. And then, maybe we get some broccolis and maybe we get some carrots, and that's fun too.
What is the saying, you guys? We don't farm food, we farm healthy soil. What is the phrase?
Oh, what was it? It was the veggies were a side effect.
Veggies are
Or
a
was like,
side
oops,
effect.
sorry for the.
Well, would you look
Yeah,
at
so,
these delicious beets?
Yeah, so a lot of what we want to do is really, we center soil health within everything that we do on the farm, and everything that we're working towards within our agricultural processes. And when I'm talking about soil health, I'm talking about this perfect collaboration or marriage of a chemical process, a biological process, and then a physical. And I'll show you what some of those are right now. Biological is probably a little bit easier to guess or ascertain. It's like the critters, the microbes, the microorganisms. For everything that you do see in the soil that's alive, there's probably thousands times of that you can't see that's living in the soil. So right now, this is actually a part of the land that we just recently had turned in some of the cover crop. It wasn't the cover crop, didn't reach its peak maturity, but it's sort of, we have to take that balance over making sure that we're able to get food in the ground to be able to hit some of these outlets that I'll speak to a little bit later. And so we cultivated this a little bit earlier.
Sorry about interrupting. I've got a question for you. Would you mind explaining for folks who might not be familiar with cover crop more about why it is amazing and important in a regenerative farming or gardening aspect?
I absolutely will, and I'm actually gonna table that question, because we're gonna go look at some of the cover crop that we have that's having a nicer stand.
Nice.
And so I'll be sure to touch on all of that, and then you could actually see a lot more of those processes and a lot more of exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the benefits of the cover crop.
Cool.
And so right now, I just wanted to sort of show you, like, when we're talking about a physical, try to get closer. If you could zoom into this bolus. A bolus is a really sort of, I guess I could say it's like an academized way of saying a ball, specific to like soil science. If you're making a bolus, it's a test to see if you have that. When we're talking about the physical, we're talking about the parent material, which, if you see this, you'll see these little streaks of lighter brown or sort of a grayish, and those are going to be all the clay particles. That's going to be the finest particles that actually, when you have a system that has a lot of clay, this is what's going to be holding on to the most amount of nutrients, the most amount of waters, because this is ionically charged. And this is going to be, I'm not going to go too far into that because that's a whole huge conversation in and of itself. But it just makes it so that a lot of these nutrients, like the nitrogen, it actually makes it so carbon is able to stick to it easier. And then carbon is the one that sort of attaches all of these other nutrients, like nitrogen specifically is the one I'll use. But when we're talking about physical, we really just want to have a bolus like that. And then you'll notice like very easily how easily that was to open it up. And that's known as soil being pliable or crummy. And so when we're looking before any cultivation, we never want to do anything when the soil is too dry or when it's too wet. If it's too dry, we're going to pulverize the soil, and we're going to be pulverizing, and that will destroy the soil structure. And so when we start to irrigate or start doing any other processes, that compaction is going to go a lot faster. What we really want to be doing is just letting the soil break on its own aggregates or on its own terms. So aggregates is like, if I were to break this up, like the way that we will process it, it'll just be basically sort of like roughing it up a little bit. So it's still breaking on all of its own terms. We're not pulverizing it too much. And as you can see, we leave a lot of residue in the soil. And I'll sort of show you that next step as to what we do after we do that initial cultivation and the turning in of the cover crop. And that's actually one of the biggest ways that we're looking to be storing carbon in the soil and these long term is through our cover crop. A lot of that, the structure of the rye stands has a lot of biomass, which is where a lot of that carbon is being stored. And so as soon as we mow it and then turn it into the soil, what happens is that all of everything starts breaking down. And really only about, I can't remember if it's 2% or a little bit less, but I'll just go for 2%, and then please feel free to fact check me and correct me and drop it in the chat. But about 2% of all of the green material is going to be what's turned into the humus, and that's that longer term carbon that we're talking about when we're talking about sequestration or long-term carbon storage. So it's if you're looking at anything, once they decompose, only 2% of those carbon molecules are going to be there long term.
It looks like 2 to 3.5%. So you were right on the money.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, and so this is going to be this field. We're still figuring out what we're going to be doing in this field. We might be doing another year of cover crop just to further prep it. And make sure that once we have a plan and have an idea of what we're going to be going in with it, the soil is going to be all prepped and ready. Yeah, we're going to walk over to this other section that was actually the first area we cultivated, and that's the next step in the process of how we do this whole our bed building. Awesome. And also want to leave it, if anybody has any questions right now, I'd love to answer them.
Yeah, we do have a couple.
Pause.
As you walk to the beautiful cherry tree in the distance. So we did have 2 questions about cover crops. First, can you remind us what that cover crop was that you were just touching?
Yeah, so sort of 2 parts to that. The one in that field, it was mostly weeds. It was mostly chickweeds. But the cover crops that we planted was a rye vetch. And we'll normally try to get what I'll do is I'll look at a lot of our soil tests, look at what we need to be fixing for the next season in the fall, and then we'll try to adjust our cropping ratios based on if we need more biomass in it, which would be heavier on rye, or if we're really looking for more of that nutrient inputs, which would be going heavier on the vetch or the or peas, which are those will be the nitrogen fixers. And hopefully I'll be able to pull out some vetch and show you the nodules that actually are doing all the heavy lifting. Because again, like we're not we're not actually doing that much here. We're just facilitating a space.
Exactly. I would love to see those. We don't usually, see what's going on under there. There's a whole universe. And then we had another question. What cover crops might you suggest for a home gardener with raised beds? And I do want to shout out, I'm going to put in the chat a link for people who are local to Seattle or Washington State. We have one free soil test per year with the King Conservation District. They will take your soil if you mail it in, and they will test it and tell you what you're missing, so you can fill it in easier with cover crops that provide certain benefits. But Anthony, do you know? I don't know at all what is good for the home garden.
Yeah, so home garden, you actually have a lot more. You have a lot more options than we'll have in the fields, because you can control the conditions a lot better. I would say just because in a home garden you might want to be getting in a little bit sooner than we're really able to because of our moisture out here. I would say an oat pea vetch with maybe some fava beans would be a good mix. That's a really good soil builder. And when you're doing something like that, whenever I've used those, you really only need about 10% of a grass to build build enough biomass and structure, and then the rest of it is really looking at the fabaceous or the pea family plants that are doing a lot of that nitrogen fixing. And that'll actually winter kill. So as soon as it gets below 20 something, the oats will die, and so it allows it just makes it easier to deal with a lot of that residue that's going to be in the fields, and you can get in there a lot sooner, plant your early spring garden. And yeah, so oat pea vetch, what's that? Explain what residue is. Yeah, so residue is all of this here, like all this leftover plant matter. That's what we call the residue. And that's, we try to keep as much of it in the ground, because if you look at all this, everything that you're seeing that's green, those are nutrients that are coming out of our soil that we had put in. And so if we can break those down and return them back into the soil, it just means that we're able to do a lot less in our fertilization application, which we're trying to move towards having our fertilizing all covered through our cover crop. Yeah, were there any other questions?
Not about the cover crops, not yet, but do feel free to ask.
Great. Well, I'll just explain what's going on underneath. So right here, this was this is actually the first year that we're going to be growing crops in this field. In a few years, there were flowers here, and this was a used field before, and then we're sort of reinvigorating it or getting it going again. And so we cultivated it after spreading another rye vetch. And after cultivating it, we put this black plastic on, these silage tarps, and this is called occultation. And all occultation is like, blocking out the sun and covering up. So you can think of like the occult when you think of occultation, and it's actually like very when I made that connection, it was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, like blocking out the sun. And so it works on two levels. One, you'll notice the difference of this color right here. Like this is actually one of the rye that we have. So if you notice a difference where you had the occultation, the silage tarp on versus where you don't, it's not able to photosynthesize. So that's actually starting to break down a lot faster. And then also the heat from having a black surface on, it absorbs a lot of that heat. It allows things to break down a lot faster. So we use this as a tool, one, for weed management, to heat up the soil a lot in that early season, because that's going to be one of those things that'll really affect your seed germination, is your soil temperatures. So we want to be trying to heat up the soil as much as possible, and also if we can be implementing systems that we can just set and sort of forget for a little bit, and then come back to, that's always ideal. As we're we're running around all over the place, and anything that we can do to make management easier, while still maintaining what we're really trying to get out of out of this farm and really trying to see out of the processes, and like and the means in which we're building the soil, the better.
Yeah, and you know, on a conventional farm, I was just thinking they would just come through with tractors, rip up all the beauty and all the you know hard work that the soil has done, and all the you know biological activity that's happening in the soil is just ripped up, and then they plant and use fertilizers that are quite toxic to marine environments and all these things. And you know the hard work that Anthony and the soil team at 21 Acres does is in, you know, it's harder, but it's honestly much more, it's what's necessary to help heal the land. This is why we don't have as much erosion on regenerative farms, because the soil is full of plants and is healthy. Water retention is higher and carbon sequestration is higher, and I just can't wait for the day when conventional farming starts using these longer methods of healing the soil to plant better crops. Their crops are going to be better, the earth is going to be better. I just look forward to that being mainstream and mandatory. We have a question from Sue, and this is a good one. I notice you have a fair amount of buttercup growing. How do you manage and reduce this plant? Hard work. I'll let the soil team answer that one.
I'm going to flip that question around and ask, how do you? So buttercup that's one of our largest challenge. That's one of our most challenging weeds. Unfortunately, there's no easy answer for it. It's you just gotta pull it as much as possible. The challenging thing is that every single time one of those roots break off, that's a new plant. And it's like if you we've tried covering it with black plastic, solarizing it, which is using clear plastic and letting it cook out. But it'll always come back, and the more it's actually like the more organic material you're putting on it, that even exacerbates the problem. And so that's a really challenging one. And unfortunately there's really no easy answer other than just pulling it out as much as possible and trying to get as much of those roots out.
And you got there, the beds for the growing of all the produce, those are really well managed. I'd say it's beautiful and rustic and kind of organic. Like it's not overly plucked. All those weeds are they're not making a problem for the food necessarily, but there are still some areas that do need hand weeding within the beds. But yeah, so I wanted to say it's not in the food as much as a problem, but it is for the wetland spaces. Look at all these.
The buttercups have been sort of one of the banes of my agricultural career, and so they're very, very, very difficult to try to manage. And so what we do is more just try to focus on strengthening the plants that we want to be growing in the early seasons, to give them that sort of competitive advantage. And then in some crops, like we don't even really worry about them as much because they're going to be shaded out by, like, for squash. And so we also look at things from a whole system standpoint of looking at how we're doing our rotation, which is we have an 8-year crop rotation here. And so we use that as one of our main weed management tools too. Trying to offset the natural cycles of these weeds can really do a lot to decrease the prevalence and frequency. But so now we're in the greenhouse, and this was last time I think we had the farm tour, this was up, but we had a snowstorm that collapsed our new greenhouse, and all of our team came together and sort of barn raising event. And actually, if you all look at every single one of these boughs here, these were all hand bent by our restoration specialist Jess and camera person extraordinaire. And so yeah, we actually custom. It's a custom greenhouse. Artisan, some say. I am that some. And we needed to get the pitch a lot more extreme because it had collapsed from the snowstorm. So we have some supports coming in, and we're going to be trying to fit as many triangles in to try to strengthen the supports as much as possible. But yeah, so what
people in the chat are just saying it looks really beautiful in there. You've done a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so these are all of our little plant babies. They're going to be going into the ground. When Jess was on the other side of the greenhouse, those are actually going to be going into the field that we just saw. Those are going to be our greens, our roots, a lot of those things that are going to be more frequented and more steadily harvested. And then now we're looking at some of the tomatoes and eggplants. And this is actually one of my favorite crops. They're just like if like y'all have to join the farm tour in like August and just see these rows of tomatoes, and we do some really cool experiments with them. We're upping our number of dry farm tomatoes, which is something I'm really excited about, and it's actually exactly how it sounds. It's just tomatoes that don't get a drop of water, and we actually might be putting them under caterpillar tunnels to make sure that they don't get a drop of water in our climate. And what ends up happening is it's a lot about water conservation, and for farmers who might not have access to water irrigation, it serves as a really sort of profitable means to be able to cultivate crops and turn a profit and not have to be worrying about a lot of these water resources, which is extremely difficult for farmers to get access to, especially when you consider the politics of these water rights, and that's getting into a rant.
It's a really important one. Maybe in August we can revisit that too, because that's the dry season.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's our greenhouse. I want to just leave it. If anybody has any questions about anything we have, I can talk through some of our soil mixes that we have. But right now we're really just in the next couple weeks to months, this greenhouse is going to be full. So by next month's farm tour, all the tomatoes should be potted up. This greenhouse is going to be like completely full green. We're going to be getting ready to plant all the squash out in the field, and it'll be really exciting.
That's wonderful. Well, I just want to give a time check too. We're at 11:36, so we have 24 minutes. And I did have a question about the what you're growing. So I guess for home gardeners, it's still a little cold unless you have a greenhouse. Are there things that you can direct sow right now into home beds?
Yeah. And we can actually be throwing crops out in our field right now. The only reason we're not is because what we're really trying to do with the farm is let the cover crop reach its peak maturity and then turn it in, because that's when it's going to be doing the most benefit for the soil and carrying the most carbon when we're turning it in. So for home gardeners, pretty much any brassica. So when I say brassica, I mean like the kale, collards, cauliflower, broccoli, so kohlrabi, and those are all just like one species of plant. And then like the chards, any leafy greens you can do right now. Root crops, the carrots, beets, radishes, rutabagas. If you want to get like real exciting, you can go parsley root or celeriac. And if nothing else, just because it's really fun to say celeriac and tell people that you're growing that. And it's really great in soups.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's actually like right now is when a lot of those early spring crops are going in. It's pretty much everything but fruiting crops you can and you know that's a pretty broad generalization, but for the most part, everything but fruiting crops can be going into the fields. And home gardeners, y'all actually have the benefit of having more buildings around and more like areas that are actually trapping heat and radiating heat. And so in the home garden, there's actually quite a bit wider of a growing window and wider of a growing season, because there's more, you have windbreaks, you have all of these different things that's contributing to creating more heat and reducing the amount of like frosts that can come in, or the how I guess strong the frost will affect some of the plants.
That makes me so happy to realize, because I was worried I would have like maybe a shorter season, but I'm now emboldened to start planting. Thank you. And I hope other people are too. We did have some questions too that tie into what you mentioned about cover crop development. So Pam had some really good questions. Thank you. How do we turn in the cover crops without hurting the fungi and microbes? And this could be a good time to speak about maybe our tilling practices here with our soil on the farm and what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. I'm actually gonna walk over to some of the cover crop that we have in the ground and then sort of talk through as we're actually looking at what we have. So.
And one more, are there animals on the farm that can eat the buttercup? That would be nice.
Ooh, that would be nice. So buttercup, I would say no.
Okay.
Buttercup has been and again, like, this is one of those things to definitely fact check on me, because I focus on veggies, and animals I think are just sort of like more of a fun sort of thing for me, but I'm pretty sure buttercup is poisonous for cattle.
Oh.
And actually the goats don't go by it, they don't eat it, which makes me think it also might be poisonous for a lot of the
You are
ruminants.
right. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. Cattle and goats can be poisoned by buttercups. They produce this bitter milk and reddish color, and then that's the toxic material, I guess. So that's a great question, because there's so much that comes with animal husbandry on the farm that we do implore, and we don't want to hurt them. So sounds like, yeah, the goats don't even go towards it. That's that good instinct.
Yeah.
Thank
I'm
you.
always really surprised by all that, like how they know. It's just like innately buttercup bad, which
Blackberry?
is like, I feel that too. They eat the leaves of blackberries. Great. So I'll answer Pam's question and then go more into everything cover crop, or I can even just answer it as we're talking about cover crop. So this is one of our cover crop fields. This is the rye vetch that we're talking about. And as you see, like when we're talking about biomass, it's just how much carbon material you're able to build. And that, again, that's going to be the building block in which you're creating that soil structure. So it's all about carbon as building on top of that to make sure you have enough nitrogen, make sure you have enough of all these different types of nutrients that you'll be having in the soil. So when we're thinking about what the cover crops are going to be doing, I look at our soil test results a lot and understand, one, do we need to be adding a lot of nitrogen into the soil? For our farm, we usually don't. Do we have excess phosphorus? Where's the pH? We look at a lot of even like anecdotal evidence that'll be in our farm journal from for our organic certification, looking at some of the weeds that have been found in the fields, the pests, everything. And once we sort of ascertain that, we adjust mixes. This last year we didn't do that as much, just because we were very strapped for time, and so we went to Nash's, and they have a pretty good mix of rye vetch, and we also knew that one of the main things we're wanting out of out of the cover crop because our nutrients are relatively balanced, with the exception of some excess phosphorus, which you can actually get at with letting a cover crop go to seed and then removing all of that material, because phosphorus is usually held in the seed. It's usually not necessary, but the main thing we want to be doing is breaking these weed cycles. And so one of the things that rye does, which is really great, is it's something called allelopathic, and that means its roots. I'll pull one up if I can. The roots of rye, it'll have these exudates that inhibit seed germination and inhibit plant growth. And so it also just like, yeah, so these are the roots of the rye. And so that helps a lot with our seed germination in the wheat seed bank. And if we're able to get out a lot of that with the plants that we're growing in it, that means less work for us in the growing season when we're running around all throughout trying to harvest, trying to distribute, trying to weed, trying to work with folks, and then so if we're always looking at how we can be working in tandem with the natural processes of the land. And so allelopathic, another thing when we're talking about biomass, this is all the biomass, all this green, more of that rigid. When you see these the more rigid stands on the grass, that's where a lot of that carbon is held. That's a lot of, it's called the lignin, and that's usually what takes the longest time to break down in the soil. The other thing that we like the rye for is it does a lot of it builds soil structure. And when I'm saying that is when we, and this is when I'll sort of start getting into Pam, your question here. The way that we'll terminate is we mow it, and we have to wait until this rye is going to seed, and it's called the milking stage of the grass, or when it's reaching anthesis, or it's like peak maturity. And that's the point where there's about a 1 or 2 week window that we have to terminate the cover crop. And if we get it when it's at that anthesis or that peak milking stage, and the way you can tell if you take the seed heads and just like pinch them, there'll be milk coming out. So that's why it's called the milking stage. If we cut it at that point, that's the point where the seeds are developed enough where you're not going to get regrowth from the base here, and the seeds are not developed enough to be viable for reseeding. And so that's the point where if you get it on either side of that window, even by a few days or like a week, you're getting regrowth. You're going to have seeds dropping, or the seeds that you mow are going to be viable, and you're going to be having a introduced weed into your farming ecosystem, which, I take rye over buttercup, and it's a much easier weed to manage. But it also means that it'll take longer for that material to break down, which is what we're really wanting it to do. And so when I'm saying soil structure, grass has really fibrous root systems here. And what happens when you cut this, and the flail mower will cut about there, all of this plant material is going to die, and it's going to decompose. And then what happens when all of those fibrous roots, they start decomposing and creating those pathways, that's what that soil is left with. So it's really creating those aggregates that we don't need to come in and do too much work. And so that's what we mean when we're talking about soil structure. And in terms of our how we actually terminate and not affect a lot the microbes, it's all about timing. It's all about timing. If you're because we do turn our cover crop in to allow it to decompose, and if we time it if it's too dry, we're just not going to have enough moisture for it to decompose. We're pulverizing the soil. And that's when you're getting the destruction of a lot of the biotic factors. That's when you're changing that's when you're going to get a lot of these mycorrhizal communities dying off, and that's when you'll get the microbes dying off, as if you're cultivating at improper times. Because tillage is like, mass tillage is very detrimental, but if done at a proper time and responsibly, a light till can be a benign process. And that's just, and it is like, really, I cannot stress enough, timing is everything. Timing is absolutely everything with farming. And another thing, so we don't have a tiller here. What we have, the machine that we have, or the equipment that we have to be able to manage this, is we have a flail mower that just chops it down, like grinds it up and masticates it into these really small pieces. And then we come through with the power harrow. And a power harrow, it has a circular motion on the blades. And so you'll have all these blades that are just spinning around and spinning around and spinning around, as opposed to a tiller, which has sort of a scouring motion. And that scouring motion, that's what's causing that pan down below. And that's when that's one of the things that you're getting when you're one of the detrimental things of tilling. And again, when I say it's a benign process, you can do one till in a field and not have a lot of these detrimental processes happen, as so long as you are breaking up that pan. And what we use for that, that's called the primary cultivation. And primary cultivation is just all about increasing airflow into the soil, allowing, you're basically waking up a lot of those microbes and a lot of those microorganisms, because nothing we want to be doing on the farm is going to be harmful to these communities. It is true that if we even like the power harrow, as light disturbance as it does, those fields that we saw, that was done with the power harrow, so you could see all the plant residue was still there. If things were breaking up, they were breaking up on the aggregates terms, or the soils terms, which is also how our primary cultivation works with the broad fork. And in some of the next months, we'll be able to show you that, all of those processes. But yeah, so the power harrow, it breaks up on their own terms, leaves a lot of like large clumps, and we do break some of those mycorrhizal networks, but how quickly they spread. And when we talk about incorporating, when we do this cultivation, we're also using compost we use compost as a biotic inoculant. We don't actually want to be raising our organic matter level in the soil, because we're right around 5 to 6%, which is that sweet spot for Western agricultural crops. And so when we're adding in this compost, it's actually providing a lot more. One, it's introducing a lot more mycorrhizal networks into the soil, and so it's not even taking a step back to take like 3 steps forward. You are breaking some of those networks, and then you're reintroducing a lot more for the mycorrhizal network to sort of continue and continue to be building that fungal duff. And I think another interesting thing about some of these mycorrhizal communities and mycorrhizal networks is like, this was an old arugula field, but there's certain crops that mycorrhizal fungus actually doesn't form on the root systems, and brassicas are one of those. So if this might just be like sort of like if folks are inoculating a bed that has a whole bunch of broccoli with mycorrhizal communities, I still absolutely encourage it. It's really great for the soil, but do it for the soil, and do it for the health of the soil ecosystem, because they don't really form those connections with the brassicas or the broccolis or the cauliflowers or the kales.
That's good to know. I had no idea. I just love how, it seems so kind of like simple to like start, you know, planting things because of the natural processes that occur. But farming is truly such an incredible science, and agricultural science is there's a lot to consider, and it's a little different for every community too. Like, you know, the soil that you have, we have Tequila and in other parts of this area, this wetland, like people have a little bit different soil, and people have a little bit of a different shading time, and it all just, it's also there's just so much to learn and appreciate about all these processes. I had no idea about the brassicas. Well, we had a question too, as we wrap up with like the last 10, almost 7 minutes of the tour. I feel like you mentioned we gave a good game plan, and sounds like we talked about a lot of the things you wanted to cover today. We had a question, what is our plan for the spring? So the next couple of weeks, like what do they look like for you? It's gonna be a lot. I want to help.
Yeah. What does my spring look like? Rhiannon, I would actually love, I'd love to have you out here, and Becca, since I know you're on it, anytime, we'd love to have you. You're always a pleasure to have out here and
our
working with us.
Our volunteering programs too. I just could take a quick moment to shout out all of our amazing volunteers. We are still on hold for big spring volunteer parties, which breaks our heart, but we're in the process of hiring a volunteer coordinator right now. Once we get them on the team, we're gonna have all you beautiful people back here, maybe, hopefully, so we can have your help on the farm. Anyway, yeah, what is on your plan for your agenda for spring?
Yeah, so my agenda for spring, the greenhouse that we just saw, a lot of it's just putting more plants in the greenhouse, starting to pot up those tomatoes once they get those first 2 cotyledons on there, or the first 2 true leaves. Apologies for that. So potting up a lot of plants, seeding a lot of things, and it's really, most of our work is actually going to be waiting for that cover crop to reach that anthesis point. We have those 2 fields that we looked at, and those are going to be the 2 that we cultivated those early to try to save us some time to allow the rest of the cover crop to reach maturation. And our hope is that we're just going to be trying to get all of the cover crop and the rest of the field sort of done within 1 or 2 days. And so those 2 days are going to be busy, very busy.
Yeah.
And actually, so all those brassicas we're going to be planting out in the field. We're going to be building the beds, adding some of the compost, adding some lime to fix some of that pH, to make sure that the biotic factors, or the biological factors in the soil have a condition, have a soil that's suitable for them to function in their most efficient. And actually, so I'll just talk about what these 2 fields are going to be here.
And there is also another question that might tie in well to your answers here, is how, and maybe Jess could speak to this too, but how restoration will also fit into the spring farm plan.
Yes, so great question. I love it. So the way that we kind of stopped thinking of restoration and farming as 2 different things, and we see it all as one. If we're farming, it's more of this idea and concept of land stewardship. So restoration right now, and Jess is able to answer that a lot better. But I guess we can talk about some of the projects that we might be collaborating on for this spring, which is going to be some new hedgerows, and some more pollination plantings, and yeah, so we're really excited about expanding some of our fields and creating more of these habitats for some of these native pollinators throughout the farm. And as we're ramping up into the spring season, really excited to be collaborating more and just increasing pollinator habitat, increasing wildlife habitat, and just creating more ways for you know, as we were walking around, you might notice there's a lot of trees, a lot more than just agricultural fields going on, and those are some of the most important parts of the farm. It makes it makes our job easier. It makes it so that you're having more of a native populations of bugs, insects, and creatures who are also able to contribute to a lot of our pest and disease pressure on the farm. And so, you know, we're going to be working on some hedgerows, planting some more, putting some more areas just of like pollinators throughout the farm. And then always a perpetual battle against a lot of the encroaching weeds in our areas.
It's an everyday, you know, effort and also note taking. And one of the cool things about 21 acres, along with most, I mean, every place, but definitely 21 acres, is we're a living laboratory. So we're doing a lot of experimenting and documenting, and hopefully this impacts, you know, agriculture, regenerative agriculture in our area. Well, I hope that people can learn from any mistakes or any successes we have here. And I hate ending because I could literally stay on the farm tour for the rest of my life. I love it here. I love, even though it's virtual, we do have 1 more minute left in the program. So I just want to quickly plug our virtual programs, and definitely come join us on our next farm tour, which happens the 4th Saturday in the month at 11. And we were just so grateful to have everybody here. If you have questions for farming, for education, and for more about what we do, please email us generalinfo@21acres.org. I'm going to follow up with all of you through Eventbrite for some links and more explanations. And, you know, we have in the chat, I was linking stuff to our blog. I'm going to give you some more resources for folks who are interested about expanding on these topics, like regenerative farming and restoration, and how they're one and the same, how we use animal husbandry, how we do cover crops, because these beautiful people that you're seeing on screen or behind the screen have written a lot of great content on the blog. And that looked yummy. What was that? We just want to share with you.
That was a kale flower.
Yummy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the benefit of letting them grow over. I guess really quickly, could you share why the kale is all here, and yeah, benefits to having things kind of over winter, and then we'll be off the tour.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the benefits of letting them over winter is that you can stand out here during a farm tour and be able to eat a whole bunch of kale blossoms and kale flowers. It's also, we like to keep them out here because they will overwinter, and that's why we chose these varieties specifically. This is a Westlander kale, relative like some of the winter borers, which are the more cold hardy ones. And we plant them so that we're able to extend our growing season and extend our distribution through into the really the early spring. We like to give them a break around November.
It's also good habitat for bugs and pollinators who are like, hey, it's freezing out here. I need some drop of water and a little flower.
Yeah, and we're actually very last thing, with the collards, we're actually going to be starting to do distribution here in a few weeks with some of these collards. Off of each plant, we get about a bin full, and so I'll really quickly just sort of explain where some of these collards are going to be going towards, or going to. One of the things that we've been working really strongly with is trying to develop distribution partnerships and working with agencies and organizations that have a wider distribution channel and network, and really wanting to partner with organizations that have that are doing really meaningful work and interrogating this concept and idea of agroecology. And so one of those folks is Fair Start, and they run transitional employment programs for folks in the culinary industry. And once COVID hit, they took a huge shift from their restaurants and their distribution channels to specifically work with shelters and meal programs to be providing meals. They served over 1.5 million meals last year, just since the start of COVID. And so we've been working with them through different contracts and grants to be trying to make sure that they're continuing to have fresh fruits and vegetables. And we're hoping that this is going to be the start of this year's distribution. So that we're really excited about all of that and building upon those partnerships that we've already started.
Oh, Anthony, that's just so wonderful. I'm grateful you took the time to explain that to us. That is so hopeful. And yeah, Fair Start is just a wonderful organization. I'm really grateful that we get to partner with them. And thank you for making these kinds of partnerships a priority for 21 Acres. Y'all doing such good work. You make my heart explode. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. Oh, well, okay. I guess we look forward to seeing you on our next tour. Thank you again for joining us this beautiful Saturday, and I hope that you're going to start your garden soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Join us later. Thank you, Jazz. Bye.